When PNSO gave us the Tyranotitan, I remarked that I would have expected Concavenator, given how good its remains were compared to the other carcharodontosaurids. We never got one, but guess who has come up with it? Concavenator is an interesting theropod with multiple points of interest. Even the name itself always impressed me as a very badass one. Conca derives from Cuenca, referring to a province in Castilla-La Mancha. If you did Latin in school, you'll remember that venator means hunter. Other dinosaurs with the same suffix include Neovenator, Ichthyovenator, and Scorpiovenator. Then there's the completeness of its fossil, probably the most well-preserved carcharodontosaurid. And for a group more well known for its mega theropods, Concavenator is actually pretty small, estimated to have been 5 to 6 meters or 16 to 20 feet. Accounting for this curvature here, I estimate the length to be roughly 18 centimeters or 7.1 inches, or about 1 to 33. For 1 to 35, that would be a 6.3 meter or 27 foot animal. Still a reasonable estimate, I feel. Now here's the 1 to 35 scale Wonder Artistic Models humanoid. And here's the 1 to 33. And just to give you an idea of how small it is, here's the most recent Haolonggood Concavenator, if you have it. Again, it comes in two variants. You have the yellow here, and then the blue. The blue is more like a grey or a grey-green, with black markings. We've seen similar in other offerings, so again, it might feel a bit derivative. The yellow, on the other hand, is very striking, and if it reminds me of anything offhand, it reminds me of their old model of the namesake of the clade, the flame version of the Carcharodontosaurus. The pose is a rather aggressive stride. It balances quite well, with the tail nicely off the ground in a dynamic curve, but it depends on the surface as well. For example, on this table, this one balances better, and this one falls over easily. It's the other way around on my shelf, so let's take a closer look at the more muted grey variant first. Ahaha, see what I mean? First of all, the head is a highlight, since many carcharodontosaurids have poorly preserved skulls. Now here's the reconstruction from Cuesta et al. And you can see that in terms of the general form, it looks to match quite closely. Now theropod experts will be, I'm sure, sharing your opinions below, but the general proportions taking reference from the rise of the lacrimal looks quite close to me. Even at this size, the head is replete with small scales. Now I have to say that the grey and the black looks really badass on this dinosaur here, and the colour fades really add to the coolness of the head here. Now what's nice is that this model has infusions of green in the grey, especially in the body, so it looks refreshing compared to other similar colour schemes we've seen before. Happily, the jaw isn't articulated, and I really think that especially for smaller models, we don't want those seam lines. The teeth are better painted than in the previous Mosasaurus, and if you were unhappy with the teeth there, I think you'll be consoled by the improvement in today's dinosaur. While here, you can see the detail in the premaxillary area here. Now inside you can see the very slim tongue sitting on the floor of the mouth. Now moving to the body, I like how the neck flares in thickness towards the base, where it joins the body. Look at the skin folds and the musculature here. As a general impression, I really like the markings, the scales, and the colours, and also some of the pattern choices here. And I also like how these markings almost seem to converge towards a point here. with this V here kinda receiving it. In fact, the design of these stripes is very interesting. And here we can have a quick shot of the dorsal surface. Unlike most generic theropod bioplants, Concavenator has many interesting features. The most obvious one is this rise here from the elongated vertebrae in the hip area. It's eye-catchingly colored, but more than that, also very nicely textured. Just look at the gradation of textures as the mosaic of bigger scales in front decrease in size caudally. The almond is, I believe, warranted here. There are two ways the crest is often depicted. One is a more shrink-wrapped version that follows the vertebrae very closely, while the other allows for some soft tissue spanning the area. I like that our model is somewhere between the two, which, by continuing the sail, has a more natural look to me. The shoulder girdle is one of my favorite areas to admire texture in. Here you see that despite the small arms, they're very well detailed. You can see here again how well the paint application really serves the model. Just look at the layers of colors and the dry brushing. Really brings out the detail very nicely. Another really interesting feature are some structures that look like quill knobs on the armor. And here you see those quills. Here I might be imagining it, but I almost see that digits 2 and 3 appear to have lost some scales on the dorsum of the hand. The whole render of the arm just flows cohesively together. And here, the hook-like claws are sculpted and painted very nicely. A general word that comes to mind when I look at the detail, the paint, and the interplay of both in this model is grainy, which is ironic since this small guy looks nothing like Dorian Yates. You can see here the thighs. Just really like how the blacks, the greys and the greens blend together. The granularity of the detail. Then the tail. It's a nice color pattern, which Haolonggood does very well, all the way down to the colored tail tip. Overall, a very nice figure. I like the color, including the infusions of greens here. So that's it for this one. Now let's look at the yellow. The detail is of course exactly the same, but because of the much brighter yellows, greens and oranges, the feel, the mood of it is very different. Now the bright colors and, as you'll see, judicious use of dry brushing in various areas really make the model pop. And the detail is a lot easier to see on this one. Right off in the head, we can see the detail a lot easier here than in the grey. I really like the way the colours balance each other, with a few different colours bordered by these smoothly integrated markings. The separate zones of colour are brought together very naturally. In the body, we see the very outstanding yellow. The crest here is more a pink than the orange of the grey variant. You can see how smooth the stripes and patterns fade into the background colours. From the top, you see this orange, leading your eye to the pink of the crest or the sail. And again, we can admire the detail in the sail. So let's do a once-over. Here in the shoulder, there's an almost pointillist effect here, but these scales have a dotted appearance. And this, I think, is the money shot, showcasing the confluence of bright colour, exquisite detail, and judicious dry brushing. Now just see what the dry brushing adds to the model. For example, here, the dry brushing really brings out detail, the double layering of quills here. Those claws are very nicely done. Again, the detail just looks so good. Here in the thighs, again we note the detail in the scales and the various skin folds and creases. Such a good time for collectors now, when we get stuff like this in a mass-produced model. Again, that pointillist effect here in the dry brushing. I really like the color transitions in the feet here. Just brings out so much detail in the scalation. Unfortunately, there's what appears to be a seam line here, which is rather jarring. Very nice picture of color and detail here. The segue into the orange towards the end of the tail transitions very naturally from the yellow. So, all in all, a very striking color. Alright, let's look at the comparisons. Of course, first, we compare them with each other. It's quite obvious here, the contrast between this very somber looking grey and the very vibrant yellow here, almost cheerful looking. Because of different colors, you might notice more detail in some areas compared to the other across the two models. But in general, the detail is more obvious in the yellow. You can see here the heads, and most obviously in the forelimbs, with a very understated color in the grey, and a very loud statement in the yellow. Unfortunately, I've lost my Safari Concavenator. I can't imagine where I put it, so let's look at the other carcharodontosaurids. It will be mainly PNSO, but first, a quick look at the original Haolonggood GR Toys collaboration, particularly the flame version. Next is PNSO's own Carcharodontosaurus. And here you can see how nicely the colors go with the yellow version of the Haolonggood. And here contrasting with the grey. Along similar tones, we have the wonderfully painted PNSO Acrocanthosaurus, still one of my favorite PNSO paint jobs. Naturally, it's clear that contrasting colors on your display can look pretty good as well. Here we have the PNSO Meraxis. This striking color looks fantastic paired against our grey version today. The PNSO Tyranotitan. What a beautifully impressive paint application. What PNSO really is capable of. The PNSO Marpusaurus. Something very forbidding about this one. And finally, arguably the largest, the PNSO Giganotosaurus. Again, it goes wonderfully with the yellow, but it's also very nice with the grey. Either way, both are dead meat. Finishing off, we have the PNSO Wilson and the PNSO Cameron. So it's very nice that while PNSO gave us many carcharodontosaurids, Concavenator was an obvious gap that needed filling. And who but Haolonggood once again fills in that obvious gap? I think it's nice to see this clade filling up. Haolonggood has really improved their theropods. Although in fairness, all the way back to the Megaraptor, I thought they were already starting to strengthen this relative weakness. And I have every hope that it'll eventually give us a T-Rex worthy of their current pedigree. Next, I guess we'll be seeing the Brachiosaurus, and man, that one is going to be a whopper. For those of us who still receive red packets, hopefully that'll ease the purse strings a bit. Meanwhile, I'll see you in the next video.